The distant bellow of the train whistle cut through the scorching air, carrying with it the promise of a future that was quickly fading for Delilah Conway. Through the waves of heat rising from the dusty ground, she watched the train departing Willits station, taking with it her last hope of completing the journey westward to Sacramento. Her legs trembled beneath her, and the fever that had plagued her since Fort Laramie now consumed her entirely. The year was 1873, and the Transcontinental Railroad had been completed just 4 years prior, making travel west more accessible than ever before, but only for those who could afford it, or in Delilah's case, those who could physically endure it. At 22, she had never imagined her body would betray her so completely. She had left Philadelphia with dreams of becoming a schoolteacher in Sacramento, where her aunt had secured her a position. Now, with her meager funds depleted on medicine that hadn't worked, she found herself stranded in the small California town of Willits, still 20 miles from her final destination. Delilah clutched her carpetbag to her chest as she slumped onto a wooden bench outside the station. The world swayed precariously around her. She had been surviving on determination alone for the past 3 days, but even that was failing her now. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice seemed to come from far away, though its owner stood directly before her. Through bleary eyes, Delilah looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the harsh California sun. As he stepped closer, she could make out a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, stubble darkening a strong jawline, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "I'm fine," she lied, attempting to stand. The ground rushed up to meet her instead. Strong hands caught her before she hit the dirt. "You don't look fine to me, madam." The last thing Delilah remembered before darkness claimed her was being lifted as though she weighed nothing at all. Samuel Vaughn had not planned to visit the train station that day. At 30 years old, he had long since learned that the arrivals and departures of others were best left unobserved. 6 years earlier, he had watched his fiancée board a train heading east, promising to return once she had nursed her ailing mother back to health. The letter informing him of her marriage to a Boston banker had arrived 3 months later. Since then, Sam had thrown himself into his work as a horse trader and occasional guide. His ranch outside of Willits was modest but thriving, and he had built a reputation as a man who could be trusted with valuable stock and difficult terrain. He had come to town only to purchase supplies and perhaps enjoy a whiskey at the Frontier Saloon before returning to the solitude of his land. But fate had other plans. As he passed the station, the sight of the young woman's collapse spurred him to action before he had time to consider the consequences. Now, with her unconscious form cradled in his arms, Sam found himself at a crossroads. What happened to her? The station master hurried over, concern etched on his weathered face. "Fever from the looks of it," Sam replied, noting the unnatural flush of her cheeks against her otherwise pallid complexion. "She need a doctor. Doc Wilson's out at the Miller place. Their youngest came down with scarlet fever. Won't be back till tomorrow at the earliest." Sam nodded, making a quick decision. "I'll take her to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house then." The station master shook his head. "No room there. The lumber crew from up north took all the beds last night." Sam sighed, looking down at the young woman's face. Even in unconsciousness, lines of exhaustion marked her features. Her dark chestnut hair had come partially loose from its pins, framing a face that spoke of gentle breeding and hard times. "What's her name?" he asked. The station master shrugged. "Never saw her before, must have come in on the morning train." Sam spotted the small carpetbag that had fallen to the ground. A tag hung from its handle, partially obscured by dust. Shifting the woman's weight in his arms, he managed to read the faded script. "D. Conway. Well, Miss Conway, he murmured, seems you've run into a bit of trouble. With no better options presenting themselves, Sam carried her to his wagon, carefully arranging her on the back seat he had cushioned with feed sacks. He retrieved her carpet bag and placed it beside her, then covered her with his spare blanket despite the heat. Fever chills were unpredictable, and the last thing she needed was to catch a chill on top of whatever ailed her. You taking her out to your place? The station master called as Sam climbed onto the driver's seat. Sam hesitated only briefly before nodding. Got nowhere else to take her and she needs care. Folks might talk. Let them, Sam replied, picking up the reins. They will anyway. The wagon jolted into motion, and Sam kept the pace slow to avoid jarring his unexpected passenger. Behind him, he heard a soft moan as the woman stirred briefly before slipping back into unconsciousness. The road to his ranch wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees. In the distance, the mountains rose up blue and hazy against the sky. It was beautiful country, harsh at times but honest in its demands. Sam had come to love it over the years, finding in its solitude a balm for old wounds. Now, as he guided his horses homeward, he found himself wondering about the woman who had literally fallen into his care. The quality of her dress, though travel-worn, spoke of Eastern origins. What had driven her west? Was she running towards something or away from it? And most importantly, who would be missing her? Delilah drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of movement and occasionally the soothing sound of a deep voice speaking to horses. The fever had robbed her of any sense of time or place. Sometimes she thought she was back in Philadelphia, listening to her father read aloud in the evening. Other times, she was on the endless train journey west, the rhythmic clacking of wheels a constant companion. When she finally opened her eyes fully, the world had changed. She lay on a simple bed in a small but clean room. Sunlight filtered through curtains made of flower sacking, casting dappled patterns across a patchwork quilt that covered her. Her traveling dress had been replaced by a nightgown that was not her own, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders. Panic fluttered in her chest as she tried to piece together what had happened. The last clear memory she had was watching the train pull away from Willits station. Everything after that was fragmented, like shards of a broken mirror. The sound of a door opening brought her attention to the far side of the room. A man entered carrying a tray, and Delilah instinctively pulled the quilt higher. "You're awake," he said, his voice matching the one from her fever dreams. "That's good. You've been out for nearly 2 days. 2 days." Her voice emerged as a croak, her throat parched. He nodded, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. "I'm Samuel Vaughn. Most folks call me Sam." He poured water from a pitcher into a cup and offered it to her. "Drink slowly." Delilah accepted the cup with trembling hands, studying him as she sipped the cool water. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. Instead, he watched her with careful concern. "Where am I?" she asked when she'd finished the water. "My ranch, about 5 miles outside of Willits." "You collapsed at the train station. I brought you here since the doctor was out of town and the boarding house was full." Memories began to surface: the overwhelming weakness, the stranger's voice asking if she was all right, the sensation of being carried. You helped me," he nodded again. "You were burning up with fever. Mrs. Torres from the next property came over to tend to you properly. She's the one who got you changed and comfortable." Relief washed over Delilah at this news. "Thank you, Mr. Vaughn." "I don't know what would have happened if—" "No need for thanks," he interrupted, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same, but Delilah knew better. In her journey west, she had encountered enough indifference and opportunism to recognize that his help was far from universal. Nevertheless, I am grateful. Once I'm recovered, I'll find a way to repay your kindness. The only repayment I need is seeing you well again, Miss Conway. He gestured to the tray. I've brought some broth. Think you can manage it? Delilah nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in her stomach. I believe so. As she ate, Sam explained that he had found her carpet bag but no other luggage. Was there anything else at the station? Trunks, perhaps? Delilah shook her head. Just the carpet bag. She hesitated, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. I had to sell most of my belongings in Denver to pay for medicine. Understanding dawned in Sam's eyes, but to his credit he showed no pity. I see. Well, your bag is there in the corner. Everything's still inside. Thank you, she said again, unable to find other words to express her gratitude. Sam shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Torres will be by later to check on you. In the meantime, try to rest. Dr. Wilson said he'd come out tomorrow to make sure you're on the mend. You sent for the doctor, alarm tinged her voice. Mr. Vaughn, I'm afraid I can't afford. Don't worry about that, he said firmly. Consider it part of the ranch's hospitality. Before she could protest further, he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Is there anyone who should be notified about your condition? Family waiting for you somewhere. Delilah thought of her aunt in Sacramento, who was expecting her arrival. My Aunt Martha in Sacramento. She's expecting me to arrive soon to take up a teaching position. Sam nodded. I'll send a telegram from town tomorrow, letting her know you're safe but delayed. After he left, Delilah sank back against the pillows, exhaustion claiming her once more despite her brief consciousness. Her last thoughts before sleep overtook her were of the strange twist of fate that had placed her in the care of a stranger whose eyes held storms and whose hands were gentle despite their strength. The next morning, Sam rose before dawn as usual. The rhythms of ranch life didn't change for unexpected guests, and the horses needed tending regardless of who slept under his roof. As he went about his chores, he found his thoughts returning repeatedly to the woman in his spare room. There was something about Delilah Conway that tugged at him. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity she maintained despite her obvious distress. Or maybe it was the flash of independence he'd glimpsed when she'd spoken of repaying him. Whatever it was, it had been a long time since Sam had felt such curiosity about another person. After feeding the horses and checking on a mare close to foaling, he returned to the house to prepare breakfast. The small kitchen was filled with morning light as he fried bacon and mixed batter for cornbread. He was sliding the pan into the oven when a sound at the doorway made him turn. Delilah stood there, gripping the doorframe for support. She wore her own dress again, though it hung loosely on her frame, suggesting recent weight loss. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and though her face was still pale, her eyes were clear and alert. Miss Conway, Sam said, wiping his hands on a cloth, you should be resting. I've rested enough, she replied, though the slight tremor in her voice belied her words. And please call me Delilah. After all, I'm imposing on your hospitality. You're not imposing, he said automatically. And only if you'll call me Sam. A small smile touched her lips. Very well, Sam. He gestured to a chair at the small table. Sit before you fall. Breakfast is almost ready, she complied, sinking into the chair with barely concealed relief. It smells wonderful. I can't remember the last time I had a proper meal. The trail can be hard, Sam acknowledged, turning back to the stove to check the bacon. Especially traveling alone. I had little choice, Delilah said softly. After my father died, there was nothing left for me in Philadelphia. My aunt's offer of a teaching position seemed like providence. Sam nodded, understanding the push and pull of circumstance that drove people westward. How did you fall ill? Delilah's fingers traced patterns on the wooden tabletop. It started as just a cough in Fort Laramie. By Reno, I could barely stay on my feet during the train stops. I thought I could make it to Sacramento, but… She sighed. I misjudged my strength. Or overestimated it, Sam suggested, placing a plate of bacon on the table. Most Easterners do when they first come west. The journey takes more out of you than you expect. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sam opened it to reveal a short, stout woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Mrs. Torres, he greeted her. Come in. Miss Conway is up and about this morning. Rosa Torres entered with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to taking charge in sick rooms. She carried a basket covered with a checked cloth, from which emanated the scent of fresh bread. So I see, she said, her accent lending a musical quality to her words. Good morning, Miss Conway. You look better but still too pale. You should be in bed. That's what I told her, Sam said, retrieving the cornbread from the oven. Delilah straightened in her chair. I'm feeling much improved, Mrs. Torres, and I wanted to thank you for your care while I was indisposed. Rosa waved away her thanks. It was nothing. Women must help each other in this country. Now, I have brought some remedies that will help build your strength. She began unpacking her basket, a jar of honey, dried herbs tied in bundles, and a loaf of freshly baked bread. And news from town. Sam raised an eyebrow. News? Dr. Wilson returned last night. He will come this afternoon. And the telegram office is asking about a message for Sacramento. Sam nodded. I'll ride into town after breakfast. No need, Rosa said, placing the last of her items on the table. My Miguel is going to the mercantile. He can send your telegram. That would be helpful, Delilah said. I'd like my aunt to know I'm safe, though delayed. Rosa patted her hand. Of course, write your message and Miguel will see it sent. As they ate breakfast, Rosa regaled them with stories of her journey from Mexico to California 30 years earlier. It was not so civilized then, she told Delilah. No trains, no proper roads, just wagons and hope. She fixed Delilah with a penetrating gaze. But hope is strong medicine, yes. It brought you this far. After breakfast, Rosa helped Delilah back to bed despite her protests. Rest now, the older woman instructed. Save your strength for healing, not showing how brave you are. We already know this. Left alone in the main room, Sam wrote out the telegram to Delilah's aunt while Rosa cleaned up the breakfast dishes. She is a good woman, Rosa observed as she dried a plate. Education in her voice and kindness in her eyes. She's just passing through, Sam reminded her, sealing the telegram in an envelope. Once she's well enough, she'll continue to Sacramento. Rosa gave him a knowing look. Perhaps, or perhaps God has other plans. Sam chose not to respond to this. He'd learned long ago that arguing with Rosa Torres about divine intervention was a futile endeavor. Dr. Wilson arrived in the early afternoon, his buggy raising dust as it approached the ranch. He was a gruff man in his 60s, with spectacles that constantly slid down his nose and a reputation for blunt honesty. After examining Delilah, he joined Sam on the porch, lighting his pipe before speaking. Lung fever, as I suspected from your description. She's past the worst of it, but she's weak as a newborn foal. Will she recover fully? Sam asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. Wilson puffed on his pipe. Should do with proper rest and nourishment, but she won't be fit for travel anytime soon. He fixed Sam with a shrewd look. She tells me she needs to get to Sacramento for a teaching position. Sam nodded. Her aunt arranged it. Well, she won't be teaching anyone for at least a month, maybe longer. That kind of weakness doesn't vanish overnight, and the journey would set her back considerably. Wilson tapped his pipe against the porch railing. "I've told her as much, but she's determined to press on as soon as possible." This didn't surprise Sam. In the brief time he'd known Delilah, he'd sensed a core of stubborn determination beneath her gentle exterior. "I've written to her aunt," he said. "Hopefully she'll understand the delay." "And if she doesn't?" Wilson asked, raising bushy eyebrows. Sam hadn't considered this possibility. "I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," the doctor chuckled. "That's one way of looking at it. Another is that you've taken on more than you bargained for, Vaughn." Perhaps he had. Sam reflected as he watched the doctor's buggy disappear down the road. But something told him that Delilah Conway was worth whatever complications her presence might bring. The telegram from Sacramento arrived 3 days later. Miguel Torres brought it out to the ranch along with supplies from town. Sam found Delilah sitting in a chair on the porch, wrapped in a quilt, despite the warmth of the day. She had been growing stronger each day, but still tired easily. "A message from your aunt," he said, handing her the yellow paper. Delilah took it eagerly, her face lighting up with anticipation. But as she read, her expression changed, hope giving way to dismay. "What is it?" Sam asked, alarmed by the sudden paleness of her face. Wordlessly, she handed him the telegram. The message was brief and to the point. "Position filled. Stop. Cannot wait longer. Stop. No accommodation available. Stop. Regret. Inconvenience. Stop. Martha. Stop." "I'm sorry," Sam said, returning the telegram to her trembling hands. Delilah stared at the paper, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What am I to do now? I have no position, no lodging, and barely enough money for another train ticket." Sam hesitated, then sat in the chair beside her. "You don't have to decide anything right away. Dr. Wilson said you need at least a month to recover properly." "I can't impose on you for a month," she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's no imposition," Sam assured her. "The room was just gathering dust before you arrived." Delilah looked out over the golden hills, her profile etched against the late afternoon light. "You've been so kind, Mr. Vaughn, Sam, but I must find a way to support myself. I didn't come west to be a burden on strangers." "What were you planning to teach in Sacramento?" "Literature and composition, mainly. I was educated at a ladies' seminary in Philadelphia." A wistful smile touched her lips. "My father believed in education for women. He was quite progressive in that regard." Sam considered this. "Willits has a school." "It's small, just one room, but the teacher left last month to get married. The town council's been looking for a replacement." Hope flickered in Delilah's eyes. "Do you really think they would consider me?" "Why wouldn't they? You're qualified, and from what I've seen, you've got grit." He smiled at her. "That counts for a lot out here." Delilah's cheeks flushed slightly at his praise. "I would need references right to your previous employers in Philadelphia," Sam suggested. "In the meantime, I could speak to Judge Henderson. He heads the town council." "You would do that for me, of course." The words came easily, surprising even Sam with their readiness. Besides, Willits could use a good teacher. The last one spent more time courting than educating, from what I heard. Delilah laughed, the sound warming something inside Sam that had been cold for a very long time. "Well, I can assure you that I have no intention of courting anyone. My focus will be entirely on my pupils." Sam found himself oddly disappointed by this declaration, though he couldn't have said why. The next week passed in a rhythm that became increasingly comfortable for both of them. Delilah grew stronger daily, moving from short walks around the house to longer explorations of the ranch's immediate surroundings. Sam found himself looking forward to their conversations over meals and in the evenings, when they would sit on the porch watching the sunset. Delilah was a natural storyteller, painting vivid pictures of her life in Philadelphia and the journey west. Sam, normally reticent about his past, found himself sharing stories of his own arrival in California as a young man of 20, fresh from his family's farm in Missouri and hungry for adventure. "What made you decide to raise horses?" Delilah asked one evening as they watched the moon rise over the eastern hills. Sam leaned back in his chair, considering. "I've always had a way with them, even as a boy. My father raised draft horses, but I was drawn to saddle stock. When I came west, I worked as a wrangler for a few years, saved every penny, then bought this place when the previous owner decided to try his luck in the gold fields." "And did he find his fortune?" Sam smiled wryly. "Last I heard, he was tending bar in Sacramento." "Gold fever claims more victims than it makes rich men. Yet people still come west chasing dreams," Delilah mused. "Like you," Sam said softly. She nodded, her face pensive in the moonlight. "Though my dreams were more modest. A teaching position, independence, the chance to build something of my own." She sighed. "Now I'm back to the beginning, it seems." "Not quite," Sam disagreed. "You've made it this far, that counts for something." Delilah turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, I suppose it does." The air between them seemed charged suddenly, filled with possibilities neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Sam cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "It's getting late. You should rest." "Of course." Delilah rose, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "Good night, Sam." "Good night, Delilah." As he watched her disappear into the house, Sam realized with startling clarity that he was in danger of losing his heart to Delilah Conway. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. The following day, Sam rode into Willits to speak with Judge Henderson about the teaching position. The judge, a dignified man in his 60s with a penchant for flowery speech, received him in his office above the town's only bank. "A qualified teacher, you say?" Henderson asked, stroking his silver beard. "From Philadelphia, no less. And she's staying at your ranch, Vaughn." Sam explained the circumstances of Delilah's arrival and her current situation. "She's recovering from lung fever, but Dr. Wilson expects a full recovery. She has experience teaching literature and composition at a ladies' seminary in the East." Henderson nodded thoughtfully. "We're certainly in need of a teacher. The children have been running wild since Miss Perkins left, much to their parents' dismay." He fixed Sam with a penetrating look. "But I must ask, what is your interest in this matter?" "Miss Conway needs employment, and Willits needs a teacher," Sam replied evenly. "It seems a fortunate coincidence for everyone concerned." "Indeed." The judge's tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by this explanation. "Well, have her write up her qualifications and previous experience. The council meets next Tuesday. We can interview her then, assuming she's well enough." "She will be," Sam said with more confidence than he felt. Delilah was improving, but she still tired easily. As he left the judge's office, Sam nearly collided with Emmett Blake, owner of the Frontier Saloon and one of the wealthiest men in Willits. "Vaughn," Blake greeted him, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Unusual to see you in town twice in 1 month. Must be important business." There had never been any love lost between Sam and Emmett Blake. Years ago, Blake had tried to purchase land adjacent to Sam's ranch for a logging operation. When Sam had outbid him, securing the water rights that came with the property, Blake had taken it as a personal affront. "Just some business with Judge Henderson," Sam replied neutrally. Blake's eyes narrowed. "Word around town is you've got a woman staying at your place. Eastern lady, they say." Sam tensed, instantly defensive. "Miss Conway fell ill at the train station. I offered her shelter while she recovers." "Very charitable of you," Blake said, his tone suggesting otherwise. "Must be lonely out there on that ranch of yours. It took considerable restraint for Sam not to respond with his fists. Instead, he stepped around Blake, saying only, "Good day, Blake." "Give my regards to your house guest," Blake called after him, chuckling. Sam's mood was dark as he rode back to the ranch. He had expected gossip. It was inevitable in a town the size of Willits, but he hadn't anticipated how protective he would feel toward Delilah's reputation. The idea of men like Emmett Blake speculating about her character made his blood boil. When he arrived home, he found Delilah in the garden behind the house, kneeling among the vegetables with a basket beside her. She looked up at his approach, her face flushed from the sun and exertion. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the basket half filled with ripe tomatoes and beans. "I thought I might make a stew for dinner." The simple domesticity of the scene struck Sam with unexpected force. For a moment, he could almost imagine this was how things would always be, returning home to find Delilah waiting, the two of them sharing the everyday tasks that made up a life together. "Of course I don't mind," he said, shaking off the vision. "But you shouldn't overexert yourself." Delilah straightened, brushing soil from her skirt. "I'm feeling much stronger. Besides, I can't sit idle while you work all day." Sam offered her a hand, helping her to her feet. "I spoke with Judge Henderson about the teaching position." Her eyes lit up with hope. "And the town council will interview you next Tuesday if you're feeling up to it." "Oh, Sam." Without warning, Delilah threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. "Thank you." Sam froze momentarily, then tentatively returned the embrace. She felt right in his arms, her body fitting perfectly against his despite their difference in height. Her hair smelled of sunshine and the lavender soap Rosa Torres had brought for her. All too soon, Delilah pulled away, her cheeks pink with embarrassment. "Forgive me, that was improper." "No need for forgiveness," Sam assured her, his voice rougher than usual. "It's good news." They stood awkwardly for a moment, both acutely aware of the line they had nearly crossed. "I should finish collecting these vegetables," Delilah said finally. "And I need to check on the new foal," Sam replied, grateful for the excuse to retreat. "I'll be in the stable if you need anything." As he walked away, he could feel her gaze following him, raising questions he wasn't sure he was ready to answer. The days leading up to Delilah's interview with the town council were filled with preparation. She wrote detailed letters requesting references from her previous employers in Philadelphia, though she knew the responses wouldn't arrive in time for the interview. Sam brought her books from his modest library, works on Western history and natural science that might prove useful in teaching frontier children. On the morning of the interview, Delilah dressed in her best attire, a navy blue traveling suit that Rosa had altered to fit her diminished frame. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned her hair in a simple but elegant style. A knock at her door revealed Sam, dressed in what she recognized as his Sunday best, a clean white shirt, dark vest, and trousers without a trace of dust or horse hair. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "As ready as I'll ever be," Delilah replied, smoothing her skirt nervously. "You look lovely," Sam said softly, then cleared his throat as if embarrassed by the admission. "And qualified, very qualified." Delilah smiled at his discomfort. "Thank you, Sam, for everything." The ride into Willits was pleasant, the morning air still cool before the heat of the day set in. Delilah had never seen the town properly, having been unconscious when Sam first brought her through. Now she studied it with interest, the main street lined with wooden buildings, some boasting false fronts that made them appear grander than they were. The church with its modest steeple, the general store with goods displayed in its windows, the frontier saloon already doing business despite the early hour. "It's smaller than I expected," she observed, "but growing," Sam replied. "The railroads changed everything. We get regular shipments of goods from San Francisco now, and the lumber business brings in workers and their families." He pulled the wagon to a halt in front of a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Willits Bank and Trust. "The town council meets upstairs," he explained, helping her down from the wagon. Delilah straightened her jacket, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "How do I look?" "Like the answer to Willits' prayers," Sam said with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. The town council consisted of 5 members. Judge Henderson, who served as chairman, Reverend Collins from the Methodist Church, Mrs. Abernathy, a widow who owned the general store, Mr. Finch, the bank manager, and to Delilah's dismay, Emmett Blake, whose eyes lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. The interview began formally, with Judge Henderson asking about her education and teaching experience. Delilah answered clearly and confidently, drawing on her years at the seminary. When Reverend Collins expressed concern about her ability to handle the more rambunctious boys, she described her success with similar students in Philadelphia. "It's not just about discipline," she explained. "It's about engagement. Even the most restless boy will sit still for a good story, especially if it involves adventure or heroism." Mrs. Abernathy nodded approvingly. "That's sense, that is. My own boys were wild as hares until they found books that captured their imagination." Mr. Finch questioned her about mathematics and science, subjects not traditionally emphasized in women's education. Delilah acknowledged her strengths lay elsewhere, but assured him she was competent in arithmetic and basic sciences. "And I'm a quick study," she added. "I've been reading books on Western natural history to prepare." Throughout the interview, Emmett Blake remained largely silent, watching her with calculating eyes. Finally, as the other council members seemed satisfied, he leaned forward. "Miss Conway, may I ask why you left Philadelphia?" "It seems strange for a young, unmarried woman to travel so far alone." The question, with its implied criticism, hung in the air. Delilah felt a flash of anger but kept her composure. "After my father's death, I had few options in Philadelphia. The seminary where I taught was reducing staff, and when my aunt wrote of the opportunity in Sacramento, it seemed providential." She met Blake's gaze steadily. "The West needs educators, Mr. Blake, particularly women willing to help shape the next generation." "I saw it as both an opportunity and a calling." Blake smiled thinly. "And now that opportunity has fallen through, you find yourself conveniently in need of employment in Willits, staying at Mr. Vaughn's ranch, no less." There was an unmistakable insinuation in his tone. Before Delilah could respond, Sam, who had been sitting quietly at the back of the room, stood up. "If you're implying something improper, Blake, say it plainly so I can address it properly." The tension in the room thickened. Judge Henderson raised a hand. "That's quite enough, gentlemen." "Mr. Blake, your question borders on impropriety itself. Miss Conway's personal circumstances are her own affair." "The moral character of our teacher is certainly the council's concern," Blake argued. "Children are impressionable." "Indeed they are," Mrs. Abernathy interjected. "Which is why they need a teacher with intelligence and compassion, both of which Miss Conway has demonstrated today." She turned to Delilah. "Pay no mind to Mr. Blake, dear. His own education was clearly lacking in manners." Blake's face reddened, but before he could retort, Judge Henderson brought the interview to a close. "Thank you, Miss Conway. The council will deliberate and inform you of our decision by week's end." Outside, Delilah released a shaky breath. "That was more challenging than I anticipated." Sam's expression was thunderous. Blake was out of line. "But not entirely wrong," Delilah said quietly. My situation is unusual. People will talk. Let them, Sam said fiercely. You have nothing to be ashamed of. His defense warmed her, even as she worried about the council's decision. Do you think they'll hire me? They'd be fools not to, Sam replied, helping her into the wagon. And whatever else they may be, Henderson and the others aren't fools. As they drove away from town, Delilah found herself wondering if she truly wanted the position. The idea of staying in Willits, of being near Sam, had become increasingly appealing. But the practical side of her nature knew she needed independence, a way to support herself that didn't rely on anyone's charity, no matter how generously offered. What if they don't hire me? She asked as the town receded behind them. Sam glanced at her. Then we'll find another solution. The simplicity of his answer, the way he said, "we," without hesitation, filled Delilah with emotions she wasn't ready to name. She had come west seeking a new beginning, never imagining it might include a man like Samuel Vaughn. 2 days later, a messenger arrived at the ranch with a letter from Judge Henderson. Delilah's hands trembled as she broke the seal, Sam watching anxiously from across the kitchen table. Her eyes scanned the formal language, then widened with joy. They've offered me the position. I'm to start in 3 weeks when the school term begins. Sam's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features. I knew they would. Congratulations, Delilah. There's more, she continued, reading further. Mrs. Abernathy has offered me lodging above the general store. It's a small apartment, but she says it's comfortable and convenient to the school. This news brought a more complicated expression to Sam's face, happiness tinged with something that might have been regret. That's perfect, he said, his voice carefully neutral. You'll be right in town. Delilah folded the letter slowly, suddenly uncertain. I don't have to accept immediately. The school term doesn't begin for 3 weeks, and Dr. Wilson did say I should continue my recovery. You're always welcome here, Sam said quickly, for as long as you need. Their eyes met across the table, a current of unspoken feelings passing between them. Since that moment in the garden, they had been careful to maintain a proper distance, both physically and emotionally. But Delilah was increasingly aware of her growing attachment to Sam, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. Thank you, she said softly. I think I would like to stay a while longer if it's truly no imposition. It's no imposition, Sam assured her, his eyes holding hers. Having you here has been pleasant. It was an understatement, and they both knew it, but neither was ready to put into words what was developing between them. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson, Delilah found herself studying Sam's profile. In the 3 weeks since he had carried her from the train station, she had come to know him as a man of few words but deep feelings, someone who lived by a code of honor that had nothing to do with the law and everything to do with what was right. Penny for your thoughts, Sam said, catching her gaze. Delilah smiled. I was just thinking about how strange life is. A month ago I was on a train, desperately trying to reach Sacramento before my strength gave out completely. Now I'm here with a teaching position and... She hesitated. And... Sam prompted. And a friend, she finished, though it wasn't quite what she had meant to say. Sam nodded slowly. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Like when a stranger collapses at your feet and you end up carrying her home, Delilah teased gently. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Something like that. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibilities. Then Sam stood, breaking the spell. It's getting cool. We should go inside. Delilah nodded, accepting his hand to help her rise. As their fingers touched, she felt the now familiar jolt of awareness. From Sam's sudden intake of breath, she knew he felt it too. Inside, the lamplight cast warm shadows across the simple furnishings of the main room. Sam busied himself building up the fire while Delilah set out cups for evening tea, a ritual they had established in recent days. "I received a letter from my aunt today," Delilah said as she placed the cups on the table, "along with the council's letter." Sam looked up from the fireplace. "Good news, I hope." Delilah's expression was wry. An apology of sorts. She explained that the school board in Sacramento was unwilling to wait, and she felt she had no choice but to recommend another candidate. She sighed. "She suggests I return to Philadelphia, where she believes the seminary might rehire me. Will you?" The question was casual, but Sam's eyes were intent. Delilah shook her head. "No, Philadelphia holds too many painful memories now, besides." She smiled, looking around the cozy room. "I find I've developed a fondness for California." "Just California?" Sam asked, his voice low. The question hung between them, laden with meaning. Delilah met his gaze steadily. "Not just California," she admitted softly. Sam crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just before her. "Delilah," he began, then seemed at a loss for words. "Yes," she encouraged. "I'm not a man for pretty speeches," he said finally. "But having you here these past weeks, it's reminded me of what I've been missing, what I've been hiding from, maybe." Delilah's heart quickened. "And what is that? Connection? Companionship?" He took a deep breath. "The possibility of something more." She reached out, laying her hand gently on his arm. "I've felt it too." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Sam lowered his head until his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a tentative exploration rather than a demand. Delilah responded with equal gentleness, her hand sliding up to his shoulder. When they parted, Sam's eyes were dark with emotion. "I don't want to rush you," he said. "You've been through so much, and you're just starting a new life here." "I know," Delilah replied, "and I appreciate that, but I also know my own heart, Sam. What I feel for you isn't a result of gratitude or dependency." "What do you feel?" he asked, his voice husky. Delilah smiled, the expression lighting her face from within. "I think you know." Sam's answering smile was slow and warm, transforming his features. "I think I do, but I'd like to hear it all the same." "I care for you," Delilah said simply. "More than I thought possible in so short a time. And I'd like to see where these feelings might lead." Sam drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. "So would I." Their second kiss was deeper, a promise rather than a question. When they separated, Delilah rested her head against Sam's chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "We should take things slowly," she murmured. "For propriety's sake, if nothing else." Sam nodded, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I agree. I want to court you properly, Delilah. No more fuel for gossips like Blake." The mention of Emmett Blake cast a slight shadow over the moment. "Why does he dislike you so much?" Delilah asked. Sam sighed. "Old grievances. I outbid him on some land years ago, and he's never forgiven me, but it's more than that. Blake sees the world as a place where men like him should always get what they want, by whatever means necessary. Men like me who believe in fair dealing and honest work are obstacles to that view." "He seems a dangerous man to cross," Delilah observed. "He can be," Sam acknowledged. "But he's not above the law, though sometimes he acts as if he is." The tea kettle whistled, interrupting their conversation. As they moved apart, Delilah felt the loss of Sam's warmth, but took comfort in the knowledge that this was just the beginning for them, not an ending. The next 3 weeks passed in a pleasant blur for Delilah. Her strength returned more fully each day, allowing her to take longer walks around the ranch and even ride one of Sam's gentler mares. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, reading aloud or simply talking. Sometimes Sam would play his harmonica. the melancholy tunes floating through the night air. True to his word, Sam courted her properly, with all the old-fashioned courtesy that entailed. He brought her wildflowers gathered during his daily rides, took her on gentle excursions to show her the beauty of the surrounding countryside, and treated her with a respect that only deepened her growing feelings for him. Their kisses became more frequent, more assured, but Sam never pressed for more than Delilah was ready to give. His restraint, born of respect rather than lack of desire, only made her love him more. Love. The word had crept into her thoughts unbidden, but once there it refused to leave. 3 weeks after that first kiss, as they rode together to a meadow overlooking a small stream, Delilah knew it was time to acknowledge what her heart had already decided. They dismounted by a stand of oak trees, and Sam spread a blanket on the ground for their picnic lunch. As they ate, Delilah gathered her courage. "Sam," she began, setting aside her plate, "I need to tell you something." He looked at her attentively, his expression open. "What is it?" "Tomorrow I move into Mrs. Abernathy's apartment," she said. "And while I'm looking forward to beginning my teaching duties, She took a deep breath. "I want you to know that my feelings for you won't change with distance." Sam reached for her hand, his own warm and calloused. "I'm glad to hear it, because mine won't either." "The truth is," Delilah continued, her heart racing, "I've fallen in love with you, Samuel Vaughn. It wasn't part of my plan when I came west, but it's the most wonderful, unexpected turn my life could have taken." For a moment, Sam was still, his eyes searching hers as if to confirm the truth of her words. Then his face broke into a smile more radiant than any she had seen before. "I love you too, Delilah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling the moment you opened your eyes in my spare room and looked at me with more dignity than fear, despite your circumstances." He leaned forward, cupping her face in his hands. "I never thought I'd find love again after Caroline left. I'd convinced myself I was meant to be alone, but you changed all that, just by being you." Their kiss was tender at first, then increasingly passionate as they gave expression to the emotions they had been restraining. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing heavily. "I should take you back," Sam said reluctantly, "before I forget myself entirely." Delilah nodded, though part of her wished they could stay in this perfect moment forever. "There will be time, Sam. We have all the time we need now." As they rode back to the ranch, side by side in comfortable silence, Delilah felt a contentment she had never known before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, adjusting to her new role as Willits' schoolteacher, navigating the complexities of a courtship under the watchful eyes of a small town, even the lingering hostility of men like Emmett Blake, she would face them with Sam beside her. The future, which had seemed so uncertain just a month ago, now stretched before her, filled with promise. The following day, Sam helped Delilah move her meager belongings to the apartment above Mrs. Abernathy's store. The rooms were small but tidy, with windows overlooking the main street of Willits. Mrs. Abernathy had thoughtfully provided basic furnishings: a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small dresser, and a bookshelf that stood empty, waiting for Delilah to fill it. "It's perfect," Delilah declared, turning in a circle to take in her new home. Sam set down her carpetbag, looking less convinced. "It's small, but it's mine," she said, touching his arm. "My first real home of my own, that means something to me." Understanding softened his expression. "Of course it does, and you'll make it beautiful, I have no doubt." Mrs. Abernathy appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything to your liking, Miss Conway." "Everything is wonderful, Mrs. Abernathy. Thank you for your kindness." The older woman beamed. "It's nice to have another woman in the building. Been too many years of just me and my cat for company." She gave Sam an appraising look. "Though I don't expect you'll be lonely, what with Mr. Vaughn's attentions." Delilah blushed, but Sam merely nodded politely. "I'll be calling regularly, madam, with your permission." "Oh, you have it," Mrs. Abernathy assured him with a chuckle. "Just keep the door open when you visit for propriety's sake. Tongues wag enough in this town without giving them extra cause." After she left, Sam turned to Delilah with a raised eyebrow. "Is it too late to reconsider? My ranch is looking more private by the minute." Delilah laughed. "Mrs. Abernathy means well, and she's right we should be careful about appearances, especially with me being the new teacher." Sam sighed in mock resignation. "I suppose I'll have to court you properly in town as well as at the ranch." "I'm afraid so," Delilah teased. "Very proper, very public. And then I'll ride 10 miles home thinking very improper thoughts," Sam murmured, pulling her close for a quick kiss. "Sam." Delilah protested, though she didn't pull away. "The door is open." "Then I'd better make this quick," he said, kissing her again before releasing her. "I'll come by tomorrow evening, perhaps escort you to dinner at the hotel restaurant." "I'd like that," Delilah said, already missing him though he hadn't yet left. After Sam departed, Delilah spent the afternoon arranging her few possessions and exploring her new home. The freedom of having her own space was exhilarating, yet she found herself missing the comfortable domesticity of Sam's ranch. It was the first time in weeks they would sleep under separate roofs, and the thought left her feeling oddly bereft. That evening, as she prepared for bed, a knock at her door revealed Mrs. Abernathy bearing a tray with tea and freshly baked cookies. "Thought you might like a little company your first night," the older woman said, setting the tray on the small table. "New places can be lonesome until you get used to them." Delilah welcomed her in, grateful for the company. As they sipped tea, Mrs. Abernathy shared stories of Willits' early days, including her own arrival as a young bride 30 years earlier. "Town wasn't much more than a trading post back then," she recalled. "No railroad, no proper church, just a collection of buildings and a lot of hope." She studied Delilah over her teacup. "Takes courage to start fresh in a new place." "Or desperation," Delilah said with a small smile, Mrs. Abernathy nodded understanding. "Sometimes they're two sides of the same coin." She set down her cup. "You and Mr. Vaughn seem well matched." The observation caught Delilah off guard. "We've only known each other a short time," she said carefully. "Time's not always the best measure, Mrs. Abernathy replied. "My Henry and I knew within a week we were meant for each other, married a month after we met and had 40 good years together before he passed." Her eyes grew misty with memory. "When it's right, you know it." Delilah thought of Sam, his quiet strength, his unfailing kindness, the way his smile transformed his entire face. "Yes," she said softly. "I think you do." Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand. "Just be careful, dear. Not everyone in Willits will be happy to see Sam Vaughn find happiness. He's made enemies over the years, standing by his principles." "You mean Emmett Blake?" The older woman nodded. "Blake especially. That man has a long memory for slights, real or imagined." "Sam mentioned they had a disagreement over land," Delilah said, recalling their conversation. Mrs. Abernathy's expression turned grim. "That's putting it mildly. Blake wanted that parcel for logging, but Sam knew it would ruin the watershed for miles around. The previous owner was prepared to sell to Blake for less money, mind you, but Sam convinced him of the damage Blake's plans would cause." She shook her head. "Blake's never forgiven him for it. In his mind, Sam cost him a fortune in timber." "And he's been holding a grudge all these years?" Delilah asked, incredulous. "Blake doesn't forget and he doesn't forgive," Mrs. Abernathy confirmed. "Just be watchful is all I'm saying. Men like that look for leverage, and they're not above using the people someone cares about to get what they want. The warning cast a shadow over Delilah's evening, but she resolved not to let fear dim her happiness. She had faced worse challenges than a spiteful businessman, and with Sam beside her, she felt equal to whatever the future might hold. The first day of school arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies, and a crisp breeze that carried the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. Delilah stood at the door of the small schoolhouse, greeting each student as they arrived. There were 27 in all, ranging from 6-year-old Jenny Miller, with her missing front teeth and eager smile, to 16-year-old Thomas Baker, who towered over Delilah and regarded her with thinly veiled skepticism. "Will we be learnin' anything useful, madam?" he asked as he slouched past her into the schoolroom. "Or just more reciting and such?" "That depends, Thomas," Delilah replied calmly. "What do you consider useful?" The question caught him off guard. He frowned, considering. "Figures, I reckon. Numbers a man can use. And maybe writing that don't sound like it came from some fancy book nobody reads." Delilah nodded. "Practical arithmetic and clear communication, both extremely useful skills and both on our curriculum." She met his gaze directly. "I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that education can be relevant to your life, Thomas. I think you might be surprised." Something in her earnest tone seemed to reach him. He shrugged, but the hostility had faded from his expression. "We'll see, I guess." By the end of that first day, Delilah was exhausted but exhilarated. The children were a diverse group, with varying levels of previous education and different needs, but they shared a refreshing directness that she found appealing after the more rigid formality of the Philadelphia seminary. When the last student had departed, Delilah sat at her desk, making notes on each child's abilities and temperament. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the door open. "Hard at work already?" Sam's voice startled her. She looked up to find him leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand, watching her with warm eyes. "Sam, I didn't expect to see you today," he smiled. "Couldn't stay away, wanted to hear how your first day went." The simple admission touched her deeply. "It went well, I think." The children are bright and curious, though some hide it better than others. "Taming the wild frontier, one lesson at a time," Sam teased, coming to perch on the edge of her desk. Delilah laughed. "Hardly that dramatic, but it is rewarding already." She gathered her papers. "I should finish these at home. It's getting late." "May I walk you?" Sam offered, extending his hand. The gesture was small but significant, a public acknowledgement of their relationship in a town where such things were noted and discussed. Delilah took his hand, feeling a quiet pride in being seen with him. As they walked down Willits Main Street toward Mrs. Abernathy's store, several townsfolk nodded greetings. Some looked curious, others approving, but none seemed surprised to see them together. News traveled fast in small towns, Delilah reflected. Outside the general store, Sam paused. "I have to head back to the ranch tonight. One of the mares is ready to foal, and I don't want to leave Miguel alone if there's trouble." He took both her hands in his. "But I was thinking, perhaps this weekend, if the weather holds, we could have a picnic. There's a place up in the hills I'd like to show you." "I'd like that very much," Delilah said, squeezing his hands. Sam glanced around, noting several interested observers pretending not to watch them. With a wry smile, he bent and placed a chaste kiss on Delilah's cheek. "Until Saturday, then." As he rode away, Delilah touched the spot where his lips had brushed her skin, smiling to herself. Then she turned and entered the store, where Mrs. Abernathy was helping a customer select fabric. "There she is," Mrs. Abernathy called. "Our new schoolteacher. How was your first day, Miss Conway?" "Challenging but rewarding," Delilah replied, noting the customer's curious gaze. Miss Conway, this is Mrs. Porter. Her son Billy is one of your students." Delilah smiled at the woman. "Billy shows real promise in arithmetic. He solved a problem today that stumped some of the older children." Mrs. Porter beamed with pride. "He takes after his father in that way, always good with figures." She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I saw Mr. Vaughn walking you home. Quite the catch, if you don't mind my saying so." "Mrs. Porter," Mrs. Abernathy chided, though her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Miss Conway's personal affairs are her own business." Of course, Mrs. Porter agreed, not looking the least bit chastened. "But a single woman in a new town appreciates knowing which gentlemen are considered eligible, doesn't she? And Mr. Vaughn is quite the catch, with that ranch of his doing so well." Delilah maintained her composure, though she felt her cheeks warming. "Mr. Vaughn has been very kind since my arrival in Willits. I consider him a good friend." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Mrs. Porter said with a knowing smile. "A very good friend indeed." Later, as Delilah prepared a simple supper in her apartment, she reflected on the exchange. She had known their courtship would attract attention in a town the size of Willits, but experiencing it firsthand was another matter. There was no malice in Mrs. Porter's interest, only the natural curiosity of a small community. Yet it reminded Delilah that her actions would be observed and discussed by people who had known Sam far longer than she had. The realization brought both unease and a strange comfort. In Philadelphia, she had lived a more anonymous life, one face among thousands. Here in Willits, she was becoming part of a community where people noticed and cared about each other's lives for better or worse. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the town settling for the night, Delilah found her thoughts turning to Sam. He would be in the stable now, perhaps, watching over his mare, his strong hands gentle as he tended to her needs. The image brought a warmth to her chest that had nothing to do with the blankets covering her. She had come west seeking independence and purpose. She had found both, but also something she hadn't been looking for: love, unexpected and transformative. The journey had nearly broken her body, but in that weakness, she had discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. And in Sam's arms, she had found a home more real than any physical dwelling. With that comforting thought, Delilah drifted into sleep, dreaming of golden hills and a man whose eyes held storms and promises. Saturday dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for the picnic Sam had proposed. Delilah dressed with care in a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, pinning her hair in a style that was neat but not severe. She was just gathering the contribution to their picnic. She had prepared apple tarts made from Mrs. Abernathy's recipe when a knock announced Sam's arrival. He stood in the doorway looking more handsome than any man had a right to, his dark hair freshly trimmed, his customary work clothes replaced by a clean shirt and vest. The smile that lit his face when he saw her made Delilah's heart skip a beat. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy despite the weeks they had spent in each other's company. "You look quite handsome yourself." Sam's smile widened. "Mrs. Torres insisted I let her trim my hair before I came to town, said I was looking wild as a mountain man and would frighten you away." Delilah laughed. "I rather like your wild look, but this suits you too." They walked to where Sam had left his wagon, attracting curious glances from Saturday shoppers along the main street. Sam helped her up onto the seat with careful hands, then climbed up beside her, ready for an adventure. He asked, gathering the reins. Delilah nodded, feeling a thrill of anticipation. "Lead on, Mr. Vaughn." They drove through Willits and out into the surrounding countryside, following a road that gradually climbed into the foothills. The landscape changed as they ascended, the golden grass giving way to scattered pines and oaks, the air growing cooler and fragrant with the scent of evergreen. Sam pointed out landmarks as they traveled a distant ridge where he had once tracked a mountain lion, a stream where the trout ran thick in spring, a meadow carpeted with wildflowers after the winter rains. "It's beautiful," Delilah said, taking in the expansive view. "So different from the east." "Different, but no less lovely," Sam agreed. "It took me time to see it when I first arrived. I kept comparing it to Missouri, where everything was green and lush. But there's a beauty in this landscape that grows on you the way the light plays on the hills, the unexpected patches of color, the vastness of it all." "I understand," Delilah said softly. "It's how I feel about Willits. It's nothing like Philadelphia, with its brick buildings and crowded streets, but it has its own kind of charm." Sam glanced at her, his expression warm. "I'm glad you see it that way. Some Easterners never do." Eventually they left the road, following a narrow track that wound up through a stand of pines. The wagon bumped over roots and rocks, making Delilah grab the seat for stability. "Almost there," Sam assured her. "It's worth the rough ride, I promise." True to his word, the track soon opened onto a small clearing perched on the edge of a ridge. Below, the valley spread out in a patchwork of farms, woods, and golden hills, with Willits visible as a cluster of buildings beside the silver thread of the railroad. In the distance, higher mountains rose blue against the horizon. "Oh, Sam," Delilah breathed. "It's magnificent." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. "I discovered this place my first year here. I come up sometimes when I need perspective. There's something about seeing the world laid out like this that makes problems seem smaller." They spread their picnic on a blanket in the shade of a large pine. Sam had brought cold chicken, fresh bread, and a jug of sweet cider. Combined with Delilah's apple tarts, it made a feast worthy of the setting. As they ate, they talked of small things, the progress of Sam's foals, Delilah's experiences with her students, the changing seasons and what they would bring. The conversation flowed easily between them, comfortable yet never dull, as if they had known each other for years rather than weeks. After they had finished eating, Sam leaned back against the trunk of the pine, watching as Delilah pointed out shapes in the few clouds that dotted the sky. "That one looks like a ship," she said, indicating a particularly elaborate formation. "See the sails?" Sam squinted. "I see a horse myself," Delilah laughed. "Of course you do. To a horse trader, everything looks like a horse." "Not everything," Sam said softly, his gaze shifting to her face. The intensity in his eyes made Delilah's breath catch. She turned toward him, suddenly very aware of their solitude and the intimate space they shared beneath the pine. "What do I look like to you then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek with gentle fingers. "Like hope," he said. "Like a future I stopped believing I could have." The simple honesty of his words moved her deeply. Without hesitation, Delilah leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began tenderly but quickly deepened, fueled by emotions too long restrained. Sam's arms encircled her, drawing her closer until she was nestled against his chest. His heartbeat raced beneath her hand, matching the rapid tempo of her own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I love you, Delilah Conway," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, the words coming easily now, as natural as breath, "with all my heart." He kissed her again, his hands tangling in her hair, loosening pins until it fell in waves around her shoulders. Delilah lost herself in the sensation, aware only of Sam's touch, his scent, the solid warmth of his body against hers. It was Sam who finally pulled back, his eyes dark with desire but also with a restraint that spoke of his respect for her. "We should stop," he said regretfully, "before I forget myself entirely." Delilah nodded, though part of her wished they didn't have to stop, that they could surrender to the feelings building between them. But Sam was right. Some things were worth waiting for, worth doing properly. As if reading her thoughts, Sam took her hands in his. "Delilah, I don't want to rush you. What's growing between us is too precious to risk." "I agree," she said, though her body argued otherwise. "We have time." Sam's expression grew serious. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually. Time, our future." Delilah's heart quickened. "What about it?" Sam took a deep breath. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but I've lived enough to recognize when something is right, when someone is." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "When someone is the person you're meant to share your life with." Tears welled in Delilah's eyes as she realized where this was leading. "Sam, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm asking you to think about it, about us, about whether, when you're ready, you might consider becoming my wife." The proposal, tentative as it was, filled Delilah with a joy so profound it was almost painful. "Oh, Sam," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't need to think about it. I already know my answer." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "And?" "Yes," Delilah said, her voice gaining strength with her certainty. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Vaughn, whenever you think the time is right." Sam's face transformed with joy. He pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. Then, remembering something, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I've been carrying this for a week," he admitted, opening it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's. I had it sized for you in San Francisco." "It's beautiful," Delilah breathed as he slid it onto her finger. The ring fit perfectly, as if meant for her hand all along. "Not half as beautiful as you," Sam said, raising her hand to his lips. They stayed on the ridge until late afternoon, planning their future together. "Sam wanted to build an addition to the ranch house, a proper bedroom for us, and maybe a study where you can prepare your lessons," he suggested. Delilah agreed, but insisted she would continue teaching, at least until they had children. "The town needs a good teacher," she said. "And I've grown to love it already. Our children will have the most educated mother in California," Sam said, his eyes soft with the vision of their future family. The sun was low in the sky when they finally packed up their picnic and started back down the mountain. As the wagon bumped along the rough track, Delilah leaned against Sam's shoulder, her hand periodically rising so she could admire the ring that now adorned it. "When shall we tell people?" she asked. Sam considered. "Sunday services tomorrow would be the perfect time." "Most of the town will be there." Delilah nodded agreement. "And how soon do you think we could marry? I know these things typically take time to arrange." "As soon as you like," Sam replied. "I'd marry you tomorrow if we could find a preacher willing to do it on a Sunday." She laughed. "Perhaps not quite that soon, but I don't want a long engagement either. Would a month be too soon?" "A month sounds perfect," Sam said, kissing the top of her head. "Just enough time to prepare the house and for you to make whatever arrangements you need." As they drove back through Willits toward Mrs. Abernathy's store, Delilah felt as if she were floating on air. The future stretched before her, bright with promise. She had come west seeking a new beginning and had found more than she could have imagined. Outside the store, Sam helped her down from the wagon, then leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Until tomorrow, my love." The endearment so natural on his lips warmed her heart. "Until tomorrow." As she watched him drive away, Delilah touched the ring on her finger. still hardly believing the turn her life had taken. From the brink of disaster at the train station to the promise of a life with Sam, it was more than she had dared to hope for. Upstairs in her apartment, Delilah found a note from Mrs. Abernathy inviting her to Sunday dinner after church services. She smiled, imagining the older woman's reaction to her news. Mrs. Abernathy had made no secret of her approval of Sam, and Delilah suspected she would be delighted by their engagement. That night, Delilah slept soundly, her dreams filled with images of the life she and Sam would build together. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly, completely happy. Sunday dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of their plans. Delilah dressed with special care in her best dress, a deep green silk that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair. The sapphire on her finger caught the morning light, sending blue sparks dancing across the wall of her small bedroom. She met Sam outside the church, her heart skipping a beat at the sight of him in his Sunday best, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes lighting up when he spotted her. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you," she replied, taking it proudly. "You're rather handsome yourself." They entered the church together, drawing curious glances from those already seated. Reverend Collins nodded a greeting from near the pulpit, his eyebrows rising slightly as he noted their linked arms. Sam led Delilah to a pew near the front, where Rosa and Miguel Torres were already seated. Rosa's eyes immediately went to Delilah's hand, widening at the sight of the ring. She nudged Miguel, pointing discreetly, then beamed at Sam with motherly pride. Throughout the service, Delilah was acutely aware of Sam beside her, the warmth of his shoulder against hers, the deep rumble of his voice as he sang the hymns, the occasional glance they exchanged, full of shared secrets and promises. After the final prayer, Reverend Collins made his way to them before they could leave the pew. "Mr. Vaughn, Miss Conway," he greeted them. "A pleasure to see you both this morning." "Reverend," Sam acknowledged. "If you have a moment after the congregation disperses, we'd like to speak with you." Understanding dawned in the minister's eyes as he took in their clasped hands and the ring on Delilah's finger. "Of course. I'll be in my study when you're ready." As the congregation filed out of the church, many paused to greet Delilah, asking after her health and her experiences with the school. Several mothers thanked her for her patience with their children, and even Emmett Blake's wife, a thin, nervous woman, stopped to tell her that their son had spoken positively of her teaching methods. "Carson has never enjoyed school before, Mrs. Blake said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "But he came home Friday talking about the history lesson you gave, something about mountain men and explorers." "Carson has a bright mind," Delilah told her, "and a natural curiosity. He asks excellent questions, Mrs. Blake smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her pinched features. "Thank you for seeing that in him, my husband." She trailed off, then squeezed Delilah's hand. "Thank you." After the last parishioner had departed, Sam and Delilah made their way to Reverend Collins' study. The small room was lined with books, the desk covered with papers and an open Bible. "Please, sit down," the Reverend invited, gesturing to 2 chairs before his desk. "Though I believe I can guess the reason for this meeting." Sam smiled, taking Delilah's hand. "Miss Conway has done me the honor of agreeing to become my wife." Reverend Collins beamed. "Wonderful news, though I must say not entirely unexpected, the way you two look at each other." He chuckled. "Well, let's just say it reminds me of how my dear departed wife and I looked at each other for 40 years. Delilah blushed, but couldn't help smiling. "We were hoping you might perform the ceremony, Reverend, in about a month's time." "It would be my pleasure," he assured them. Have you set a date? They decided on the first Saturday in November, giving them just over 4 weeks to prepare. The Reverend made notes in his ledger, occasionally asking questions about their preferences for the service. "Will you be inviting family from back east, Miss Conway?" he inquired. Delilah shook her head. "I have no close family there now. My aunt in Sacramento, perhaps, but—" She hesitated, remembering the telegram that had so abruptly ended her plans to teach there. "Your new family is here," Sam said softly, squeezing her hand. "Rosa and Miguel will stand with us, and the town has already embraced you as one of their own." The Reverend nodded approvingly. "Indeed they have. Your students adore you already, Miss Conway, and their parents speak highly of your teaching." As they left the church, Sam suggested they make their announcement more widely known at the Sunday social that followed services. Held in the churchyard, it was a weekly gathering where townspeople shared food and conversation. "Everyone who matters will be there," he pointed out. "And it saves us having to tell the same news 20 times. Delilah agreed, though she felt a flutter of nerves at the thought of being the center of attention. In Philadelphia, engagements were typically announced through formal cards sent to friends and acquaintances. The direct approach of Western society still sometimes caught her by surprise. The social was already in full swing when they arrived, with tables set up beneath the oak trees that shaded the churchyard. Women were unpacking baskets of food, while men gathered in small groups discussing crops, horses, and the latest news from San Francisco. Mrs. Abernathy spotted them first, hurrying over with a knowing smile. "Well now, don't you two look like the cat that got the cream?" "Might there be news to share?" Sam chuckled. "News travels fast in Willits." "Only when there are observant eyes to see it," Mrs. Abernathy replied, pointedly looking at Delilah's ring. Before they could respond, Reverend Collins called for attention, tapping a spoon against a glass. When the crowd quieted, he smiled broadly. "Friends, before we bless the food, I have a happy announcement to make. Our own Samuel Vaughn and Miss Delilah Conway have informed me of their intention to marry." A chorus of cheers and congratulations erupted. Rosa Torres rushed forward to embrace Delilah, while several men clapped Sam on the back. Judge Henderson raised his glass in a toast. "To the happy couple, may your life together be long and blessed." As glasses were raised and good wishes offered, Delilah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the autumn sun. These people, many of whom she had known for less than a month, were genuinely happy for them. Their acceptance and support were gifts she hadn't expected when she first arrived in Willits, weak and uncertain of her future. Only one face in the crowd showed no pleasure at their news. Emmett Blake stood at the edge of the gathering, his expression cold as he watched the celebrations. When his eyes met Delilah's, something in them made her shiver despite the warmth of the day. Sam, noticing her discomfort, followed her gaze. His arm tightened protectively around her waist. "Don't worry about Blake," he murmured. "This is our day." Delilah nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course." "You're right." But as the social continued, she couldn't help noticing that Blake remained apart, watching them with calculating eyes. When he finally approached, it was with the smooth courtesy that made him so dangerous. "Miss Conway, Mr. Vaughn," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "My congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you, Blake," Sam replied, his tone neutral. Blake smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Miss Conway, I understand you've made quite an impression on my son. Carson speaks highly of your teaching methods." "Carson is a bright boy," Delilah said, choosing her words carefully. "He has a natural curiosity that makes him a pleasure to teach." "Indeed." Blake studied her for a moment. "I hope marriage won't interfere with your duties at the school. The children need stability, after all." Before Delilah could respond, Sam interjected. Delilah plans to continue teaching after we're married. Not that it's any concern of yours, Blake. Blake raised his eyebrows. As a parent and a member of this community, the education of our children is very much my concern, Vaughn. He turned back to Delilah, his tone softening. I merely wanted to express my hope that we won't lose such a valuable asset to our town. The emphasis he placed on valuable made it sound more like a threat than a compliment. Delilah maintained her composure, meeting his gaze steadily. I assure you, Mr. Blake, I take my responsibilities to the children of Willits very seriously. Marriage won't change that. Blake nodded, seemingly satisfied. Excellent. Then I wish you both every happiness. He tipped his hat again and moved away, leaving a chill in his wake despite the warm day. What was that about? Delilah asked quietly, watching Blake rejoin his wife across the churchyard. Sam's expression was grim. A reminder that he's watching. Blake never misses an opportunity to assert his influence. He makes me uneasy, Delilah admitted. With good reason, Sam replied. Blake is used to getting his way in this town. People who stand against him often find themselves facing difficulties. The implicit warning troubled Delilah, but she pushed her concerns aside. Today was for celebration, not worry. And whatever challenges Blake might present, she and Sam would face them together. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Sam threw himself into readying the ranch house, adding the promised addition with Miguel's help and painting the entire structure. Delilah continued teaching during the week, while weekends were dedicated to creating a home with Sam, Rosa, and Mrs. Abernathy took Delilah under their wing, helping her prepare for her new role as a rancher's wife. From Rosa, she learned traditional Mexican recipes that Sam particularly enjoyed. Mrs. Abernathy taught her the practical aspects of managing a household in the West, where supplies could be irregular and improvisation was often necessary. Always keep a good store of basics, the older woman advised. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. With those, you can make do even when the weather turns bad and you can't get to town. Delilah absorbed these lessons eagerly, determined to be a true partner to Sam in all aspects of their life together. In the evenings, when Sam would drive her back to town after a day spent at the ranch, they would talk of their plans and dreams, their conversations growing deeper and more intimate as their wedding day approached. One such evening, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson, Sam broached a subject they had only hinted at before. I've been thinking about children, he said, his voice soft in the gathering twilight. Our children. Delilah's heart warmed at the thought. So have I. How many would you like? Sam asked, taking her hand in his. She considered the question seriously. 2 or 3, I think. Enough that they have each other for company, but not so many that we can't give each one the attention they deserve. Sam nodded, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. That sounds perfect. A family big enough to fill this house with laughter, but small enough that we can still find time for just the 2 of us. The intimate nature of the conversation brought a blush to Delilah's cheeks, but also a deep contentment. With Sam, she could discuss such personal matters openly without embarrassment or fear. Have you thought of names? She asked. Sam smiled. I'd like to name a son after my father if you wouldn't mind. James. James Vaughn, Delilah tested the name. It has a strong sound to it, and for a daughter perhaps Elizabeth after my mother. Elizabeth Vaughn, Sam repeated. Beautiful, just like her mother will be. The tender moment was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Sam tensed, rising to his feet as a rider came into view. It was Miguel Torres, riding hard. Trouble, Sam muttered, moving to meet him. Miguel reined in his horse, his expression grave. Sam, there is a fire at the south pasture, the dry grass. It spreads quickly. Sam's face hardened. How bad? Bad enough. Rosa has already sent word to town for help. Sam turned to Delilah, conflict evident in his eyes. I have to go. Of course, she said immediately. Go. I'll be fine here, he hesitated. I can't leave you alone at the ranch. I'll take her to town on my way back, Miguel offered. There is time. Sam nodded gratefully. Thank you, Miguel. He turned back to Delilah, cupping her face in his hands. I'm sorry. The fire could threaten the entire valley if it's not contained. Don't apologize, Delilah said firmly. This is your land, your livelihood. Go protect it. He kissed her quickly, then strode to the stable for his horse. Within minutes, he and Miguel were riding hard toward the rising column of smoke visible against the darkening sky. Delilah hurried inside to gather her things, her mind racing with worry. Wildfires were a constant threat in the dry California landscape, especially in autumn before the winter rains began. She had heard stories of entire communities destroyed by such blazes. As she waited for Miguel to return, Delilah paced the porch, watching the distant glow grow brighter against the night sky. The smell of smoke drifted on the wind, acrid and threatening. When Miguel finally returned, his face was streaked with soot. Come, señorita, we must go quickly. The fire moves fast, and the wind drives it this way. The ride to town was tense, with Miguel pushing his tired horse as much as he dared. Behind them, the glow of the fire spread across the horizon, a malevolent sunset hours after the real sun had set. In Willits, the streets were filled with activity despite the late hour. Men were gathering tools and water barrels, preparing to ride out to fight the fire. Women clustered in worried groups, watching the distant blaze. Miguel delivered Delilah to Mrs. Abernathy's store, where the older woman was already waiting anxiously on the porch. Thank God you're safe, she said, embracing Delilah. Is Sam with the firefighters? Delilah nodded. He and Miguel were the first to respond. The fire is near the south pasture. Mrs. Abernathy's face grew grave. That's bad. With the wind coming from the east, it could sweep right through the valley. Throughout the night, Delilah kept vigil with the other women of Willits, preparing food and coffee for the men who came and went, bringing news of the fire's progress. The reports were not encouraging. The blaze had indeed jumped the creek that might have contained it and was now threatening several ranches, including Sam's. They're trying to create a fire break, Reverend Collins explained when he returned briefly for supplies. Clearing a line wide enough that the fire can't cross it. And Sam? Delilah asked, her voice tight with worry. The Reverend's expression was somber. Fighting like a man possessed. His ranch lies directly in the fire's path, and he's determined not to lose it. As dawn broke, Delilah stood on the porch of the general store, watching the road for any sign of Sam. The sky to the west was hazy with smoke, the sun rising blood red through the pall. He'll be all right, Mrs. Abernathy assured her, though her own eyes were shadowed with worry. Sam Vaughn is too stubborn to let a fire beat him. But as the morning wore on with no word, Delilah's anxiety grew. She paced the length of the porch, her eyes constantly scanning the road leading out of town. It was nearly noon when riders appeared, a group of men slumped with exhaustion, their clothes and faces blackened with soot. Delilah rushed to the edge of the porch, straining to see if Sam was among them. Judge Henderson was the first to reach the store. "The fire's contained," he announced wearily. "We lost 2 outbuildings at the Peterson place and some fencing on several ranches, but no homes or lives, thank God." "And Sam?" Delilah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The judge's expression softened. "He's coming, Miss Conway." Stayed behind to make sure the last hot spots near his property were fully extinguished. Relief washed over her, so intense it made her knees weak. Mrs. Abernathy put an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "There now," the older woman said gently. "Didn't I tell you he'd be all right? That man has too much to live for to let a fire take him." An hour later, Sam finally appeared, riding slowly down the main street. His clothes were scorched in places, his face and hands smudged with soot, his eyes red from smoke. But he was alive, and from what Delilah could see, uninjured. She ran to meet him as he dismounted outside the general store, throwing her arms around him heedless of the dirt and smoke. "Thank God you're safe." Sam held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "The ranch is safe, too. The fire came within 100 yards of the house, but we stopped it." Looking up at him, Delilah saw the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "You need rest. And food." He nodded, too tired to argue. Mrs. Abernathy led them upstairs to Delilah's apartment, where she had prepared a simple meal and heated water for washing. "I'll leave you to it," she said, her eyes twinkling despite her concern. "Just this once, I'll pretend not to notice that the door is closed." After she left, Delilah helped Sam remove his ruined shirt and wash away the worst of the smoke and grime. His back and shoulders bore angry red marks where sparks had landed on his clothing. "You're hurt," she said, gently touching a particularly bad spot. "Just burns," he dismissed, though he winced as she applied a soothing salve Rosa had given her. "They'll heal." As he ate the stew Mrs. Abernathy had prepared, Sam told Delilah about the fire, how it had started near a campsite, probably from an abandoned cook fire, and spread rapidly through the dry grass. "If Miguel hadn't spotted it when he did, we might have lost the whole valley," he said. "As it was close. Too close." Delilah listened, her heart aching at the thought of how differently the night might have ended. When Sam finally fell asleep in her armchair, exhaustion claiming him mid-sentence, she covered him with a blanket and sat watching him, thanking God for his safety. The fire changed something in their relationship, deepening it in ways neither had anticipated. The prospect of loss had made them both acutely aware of how precious their time together was. When Sam awoke hours later, he reached for Delilah's hand. "Marry me sooner," he said, his voice still rough from smoke. "Next week. I don't want to wait." Looking into his eyes, Delilah found she couldn't argue. "Next week," she agreed. "Life is too uncertain to waste a day of it." With Reverend Collins' blessing, their wedding was moved up to the following Saturday. The change in plans created a flurry of activity, but the community rallied around them, eager to help after the scare of the fire. Rosa and Mrs. Abernathy worked together to alter a dress Mrs. Henderson had offered a beautiful cream silk that had been her daughter's before she moved to San Francisco. The men of the town, led by Miguel and Judge Henderson, helped Sam complete the addition to the ranch house in record time. When the day finally arrived, Delilah stood in Mrs. Abernathy's apartment, barely recognizing herself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, its simple lines complementing her slender frame. Her hair was arranged in loose curls framing her face, with white flowers woven through the chestnut waves. "You look beautiful, my dear," Mrs. Abernathy said, adjusting the small veil. Like a proper bride, Delilah smiled, touching the sapphire ring that would soon be joined by a wedding band. "I can hardly believe it's real, that in an hour I'll be Mrs. Samuel Vaughn." "Believe it," Mrs. Abernathy chuckled. "That man has been waiting for you longer than he knew, and now here you are as if Providence itself brought you to his doorstep." "Or a fever," Delilah said wryly. "Providence works in mysterious ways," the older woman replied with a wink. Now, are you ready? Your groom will be pacing a hole in the church floor by now." The church was filled to capacity when Delilah entered on Judge Henderson's arm, the judge having offered to give her away in the absence of her father. Flowers decorated every pew, their sweet scent filling the air. At the altar, Sam waited, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. But it was his expression, as she walked toward him, that Delilah would remember forever, the way his eyes filled with wonder and love, as if he were witnessing a miracle. In that moment, all her doubts and fears vanished, replaced by absolute certainty that this man, this place, was exactly where she was meant to be. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion and sacred words. Delilah heard herself repeating vows, felt the cool metal of the wedding band as Sam slid it onto her finger, saw the tears in Rosa's eyes as she witnessed their union. But most of all, she remembered Sam's hands holding hers, steady and strong, a promise made flesh. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Collins declared, his voice ringing through the church. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Sam's kiss was gentle but full of promise, a pledge of all that was to come. As they turned to face the congregation, now husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous and heartfelt. It seemed all of Willits had contributed something: food, decorations, music. Even Emmett Blake attended, though he remained on the periphery, watching with hooded eyes as Sam and Delilah accepted congratulations and danced their first dance as husband and wife. "Don't mind him," Sam murmured as they whirled around the floor. "He can't touch our happiness today." Delilah nodded, focusing instead on the man whose arms held her. "No, he can't. Nothing can." As the evening progressed, Delilah found herself surrounded by well-wishers. The mothers of her students presented her with a quilt they had secretly made, each square representing one of the children she taught. Rosa and Miguel gave them a beautiful handcrafted rocking chair for their porch. "For when the babies come," Rosa said with a knowing smile. "Every mother needs a place to rock her little ones." Even Mrs. Blake approached, her manner timid but her eyes kind. "I wish you both great happiness," she said quietly. "You deserve it." As the celebration began to wind down, Sam took Delilah's hand. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Vaughn?" The name, used for the first time, sent a thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Vaughn, I believe I am." Outside, they found that someone, likely the older boys from the school, given the mischievous grins on their faces, had decorated Sam's wagon with ribbons and flowers. A sign proclaiming "just married" was attached to the back. Sam laughed as he helped Delilah up to the seat. "I see your students had some fun." "They're good children," Delilah said, waving to the crowd that had gathered to see them off, "even when they're being rascals." The ride to the ranch was magical, the road silvered by moonlight, the air cool and fragrant with autumn scents. Delilah leaned against Sam's shoulder, contentment filling her heart. "Happy?" he asked, his arm secure around her. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "And you?" "I have everything I could ever want," Sam said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Right here beside me." When they reached the ranch, Sam surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vaughn," he said, setting her down in the main room, which had been transformed with fresh paint and new curtains sewn by Rosa. "It's perfect," Delilah said, taking in the comfortable furnishings, the bookshelves now filled with both their collections, the photographs and small treasures that made it truly a home. Sam moved behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Not quite perfect yet," he murmured against her ear. "But it will be." now that you're here to stay." Turning in his embrace, Delilah lifted her face for his kiss. As his lips met hers, she knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges life might bring, they would face them together, their love a shelter stronger than any storm. 5 years later, Delilah sat on the porch of the ranch house, rocking gently in the chair Rosa and Miguel had given them on their wedding day. In her arms, 2-month-old Elizabeth slept peacefully, her tiny face the perfect blend of her parents' features. Nearby, 3-year-old James played with wooden blocks, constructing towers that inevitably toppled, much to his delight. The sound of hoofbeats made Delilah look up, a smile spreading across her face as Sam rode into view. James abandoned his blocks, running to the edge of the porch. "Papa." "Papa home," Sam dismounted, swinging his son up into his arms. "Have you been good for your mama today?" he asked, tousling the boy's dark hair. James nodded solemnly. "I helped with the chickens, and I drawed a picture for Lizzie." "Drew," Delilah corrected gently. "And yes, he's been very helpful." Sam carried James up to the porch, leaning down to kiss Delilah and peek at their sleeping daughter. "How are my favorite ladies today?" "We're well," Delilah assured him. "Lizzie slept through the night for the first time." "A miracle indeed," Sam chuckled, settling into the chair beside hers, James on his lap. "I have news from town. The school board has approved your proposal for the new classroom." Delilah's eyes lit up. "Truly, when can we begin building?" After Elizabeth's birth, Delilah had stepped back from full-time teaching, but she remained deeply involved with the Willits school. Her proposal for an additional classroom to accommodate the town's growing population had been her latest project. "Construction starts next month," Sam said. "Judge Henderson said to tell you your arguments were irrefutable and eloquently presented." High praise from the old judge. Delilah smiled, remembering the nervous young woman who had sat before the town council 5 years ago, uncertain of her future. How far she had come since then, from a stranger too weak to complete her journey to a respected member of the community, wife, mother, and still, in her own way, a teacher. "And Blake?" she asked, naming the one council member who consistently opposed her educational initiatives. Sam's expression darkened slightly. "Outvoted again, though I hear he's considering a move to Sacramento. Apparently, Willits has become too provincial for his ambitions." "That would be a blessing for the town," Delilah murmured, careful to keep her voice low so James wouldn't repeat her words. The boy had recently developed an alarming habit of echoing adult conversations at inopportune moments. Sam nodded agreement. "For everyone, especially Mrs. Blake." Over the years, Emmett Blake's hostility toward Sam had occasionally spilled over into opposition to Delilah's work with the school, but they had weathered it together. More concerning had been the rumors of Blake's treatment of his wife, whose fearfulness had only increased over time. "How is Hannah?" Delilah asked, genuinely concerned for the woman who had always shown her kindness despite her husband's attitude. "Better, I think. She was at the Mercantile today, looking less haunted." Sam shifted James to his other knee. "Carson's home from college for the summer. Having him there seems to give her strength." Carson Blake had been one of Delilah's first students, and she had taken particular pleasure in nurturing his natural intelligence. Despite his father's opposition, Carson had gone on to study law in San Francisco, funded by a scholarship Delilah had helped him secure. "I'm glad," Delilah said sincerely. "Hannah deserves some happiness." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peace of the evening and the simple joy of being together. The ranch had prospered under Sam's care, expanding to include additional pasture land and a growing herd of horses known throughout California for their quality. The house, too, had grown, with rooms added as their family increased. "I was thinking today," Sam said eventually, his voice thoughtful, "about the day we met, or rather the day you collapsed at my feet." Delilah smiled at the memory. "Not my most dignified moment." "Maybe not," Sam agreed. "But the most important day of my life nonetheless." He reached over to take her hand, his thumb tracing the outline of her wedding band. "Do you ever regret it, missing that train to Sacramento?" Delilah looked at the man beside her, at their son playing contentedly on his lap, at their daughter sleeping in her arms. Her heart swelled with love for the family they had built together. "Never," she said with absolute certainty. "Not for a single moment." As the sun set over the golden hills of their land, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Delilah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come west seeking independence and a future of her own making. What she had found instead was something far more precious, a love that had carried her not just the last 20 miles to Willits, but through all the joys and sorrows of building a life together. In her weakness, she had discovered her greatest strength. In a stranger's kindness, she had found her heart's true home. And in the vast, beautiful wilderness of the West, Delilah Conway Vaughn had finally, truly belonged.